if you're a Christian and you're a teacher or you're a doctor or you work as a refuse collector, or we think actually it'd be great if we had opportunities to. Now, how do we get into those places? Well, actually, as Christians, you are those places.
Yeah, we are.
And as we acknowledge ourselves as disciples of Jesus Christ,
That's
I
helpful.
Don't stop being a disciple.
Okay. Hello and welcome to Independence, the FIEC podcast. My name is Adrian Reynolds, Head of National Ministries for the FIEC, and I'm here with Julian Gadsby, who's from LICC, the London Institute for Contemporary Christianity.
Hello.
Hello, Julian. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
Nice to have you with us. We've done a podcast already. We talked about theology of work, and if you've not listened to that, do go back and listen to it, kind of building on that. We're thinking today really a bit more about how do we help church leaders and pastor people in church well. And I was going to say people who are in work, but I now know, listening to the first episode, I'm not to say that. Because actually everyone pretty much is working in church in some capacity.
Absolutely, in some
not working in
capacity.
church. Everybody in church is working in some way, in different ways, at different levels. Some people will be paid, some people won't be. Some people will be doing more than others, especially because of capacity, perhaps an age and stage and that kind of thing. But everybody is called to work. It's a higher calling, understand that. But I guess we want to be helping people in our churches think well about work. And I don't think, you've been a pastor, I've been a pastor. I don't think we're great at doing that. I think we've drunk deeply at the well of worldliness.
Yeah.
Here's a good example. I was telling you about this just before we went on air. About a guy when I was working in business, who was in an American company that I worked for. He was very steady Eddie. Did the same job, had done the same job for years, was close to, a few years off retirement. But the remuneration system in the company penalised him because he didn't want to be promoted. And I guess as a pastor, I'm often celebrating in my heart. People say, I got a new job, paid a bit more, got a promotion at work, and I'm thinking, great news. And I'm thinking probably in quite a worldly way. So I need to do a bit of recalibrating myself, but I also want to be able to help people in church life. So kick us off. How can I be a help? How can I be a pastor, a shepherd to the flock when it comes to work?
I think one of the ways you can do that is by recognizing that discipleship, which is a huge issue, is something that doesn't just happen in church, but actually happens wherever we are.
Okay,
actually,
just define some terms here for me. What do you mean by discipleship?
So discipleship is following Jesus. Following Jesus, being called by Jesus to be his apprentice. I like John Mark Comer's description of a disciple as an apprentice to Jesus.
Yeah, I like that.
And I think that if we see that wherever we are, that we are still a disciple. That discipleship happens wherever we are.
Okay.
It enables us as pastors, I think, to recognize that discipleship doesn't just happen in church, but actually it's wherever we are, there is an opportunity to grow as disciples and to serve as disciples of Jesus Christ. We don't have an off button.
So if I'm interested in the welfare and the flourishing of the flock, which I am, I'm called to do that as part of my work as a pastor, I need to be interested in helping people in the church flourish in every area of life.
Absolutely.
Right? Not just church areas, but every area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so recognizing, as we said in a previous podcast, about the inherent dignity of work. Yeah. And actually, as people are made in the image of God, God is the one who he works in creation, and he is the one who gives us work to do. And therefore and I think as pastors actually recognizing that what people do in their lives, whether that's paid work, whether that's voluntary, whether that's at home or wherever that is, that actually that's worthwhile, and that's a place of dignity, a place that they can serve God and love and serve other people.
Okay.
And I think it's even just this, to start off is recognizing that.
Yeah. And some recalibrating as well, because I guess people will have odd views of work, won't there? And so we talked about a couple of extremes, perhaps. Someone in the church, let's call him Bob, might think about, I'm going to work just so that I can earn money, so that I can support mission, I can tithe to the church, pay for my time. It's a means to an end. Yeah. Maybe Brenda, I don't think we've got anybody in our church called Bob or Brenda, so I think we'll say for Brenda sees work as her mission field. Yeah. Right. So she's her little cubbyhole where she works, she's got a text on the wall so that people will ask her about Christian. She wears a fish in her lapel. She's got a T-shirt which she wears on dress down days, which says, "Ask me about Jesus." And she's got a Bible open on her desk. She's hoping that actually, she's going to work just so she can share the gospel. That's her thought. Yeah. And both of those have got some truth in them, right? Absolutely. They're not entirely erroneous, but they're not what we think about work.
But not the entirety of it, no. And I think it's recognizing that if my work has value and I can serve other people, my colleagues, customers, whoever it is, I can serve those people, then the way that I do that, the way I can demonstrate Christ-like character and do work that blesses and actually is actually of good values, good work.
Right. So what does Bob need to hear specifically?
Well, I think first of all, I think probably he needs to hear that his work matters.
Right.
I think he needs to hear that actually.
So it's more than a means to an end.
More than a means to an end. What he does matters.
And is that that's true, Bob, brother, whatever you do.
Absolutely.
So you're a refuse collector, you're a doctor.
Absolutely.
And he's thinking, well, if I was a doctor, of course, I can see that would be some value in that, but I'm a refuse collector. No, actually, you're blessing people. You're helping them with great dignity in that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the danger is that if we're in areas in churches where we have a lot of people who are in quite high profile or highly paid jobs, that can make us as pastors feel much more successful than if you're working with people who are if you're in an area where
that's
poorer.
interesting. So
you actually think, well, actually, because all the value that they're giving me, I can't then not be able to tithe as much because they're not earning as much.
Right,
but actually, therefore, am I saying, well, actually, I really would great if we got some more people who earn some more money into the church.
So there becomes a status about that.
It becomes a status as opposed to seeing how do you pastor that group of people who that the world may not necessarily see their work as terribly important, but you remove their work from the world and you see what happens.
Yeah. Okay. So this is interesting. I didn't think we'd go here, but actually it is interesting that, so if I'm going to pastor people in the church, well, in all areas of life, including work, there's a bit of heart searching needs to go on first. Actually, in my own heart.
Absolutely.
Because there's worldliness there.
Yeah.
There are worldly views of work. Yeah. Secretly, I'm thinking it's not just that actually a doctor who's earning 100 grand, is going to tithe 10,000 to the church. Actually, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great if people come in and they see you've got GPs here? I mean, it feels like I'm actually, if I'm being honest about it, I'm kind of, I'm getting into James territory on time, welcoming the rich. And so there's actually a bit of heart searching.
Absolutely. And I ministered in the church. I ministered in churches where we had a real mixture. We had people who were farmers. We had people who worked in retail, but we also had people who were, judges and lawyers and business leaders. We had all of those, and it's very easy to think that, to treat some differently to others and think actually because of your work, because of your status, actually you are more important than others. And I think it's a constant danger.
It's invidious as well.
It is.
And so I'm doing an evangelistic service. Oh, what high profile person could I interview at the front that will, impress people?
Yeah. And I think we do that in life, don't we? We make kind of great things of footballers or entertainers or people who are famous Christians. So we say actually we want to demonstrate, and actually most of the time we can't really connect with those people. But actually we don't celebrate the people who have less high profile jobs, shall we say, but actually
perhaps they're unpaid, they're doing a caring job, caring for elderly relatives or something.
Absolutely. And I think the danger is as well is that we see that if those people are in jobs which take them out of church life, for example, they're not able to come to a Bible study or to a prayer meeting, we somehow think actually that they're somehow failing as Christians, as a congregation, where they're not quite reaching the standards because they haven't.
So that's interesting, isn't it? So again, this comes back to a bit of self-examination, doesn't it? Because we say, and we would understand this as leaders, don't believe in the sacred secular divide. Of course, I don't believe in that. Yeah. But I'm very high view of work and all the rest of it. But what do you mean you can't come to the midweek Bible study because you're you're caring for family or you're putting the kids to bed and it's not the right timing? What do you mean? And actually, we do start creating that sacred secular divide. Without realising it. Is that a fair assessment?
It is, but it's not to say that the home group or the prayer meeting or that even being in church on a Sunday morning or Sunday evening
they're not unimportant.
No, and nobody should ever hear that those things are not important. they're vital in so many ways to. But actually, if we locate discipleship simply in those terms, then actually what we're doing is we're saying that unless you can be part of those things, you're not going to grow as a disciple. You're not going to be serving. You're not going to be contributing, as opposed to, are we actually serving them? And I think the dangers. I found this so many times as a pastor, as a minister, when when people pray for you, and some of the language that people use is actually we want to pray for Jules so that we can help him in his ministry.
Yeah.
And I think the danger is that are we actually helping and equipping people for their ministry? And if we see work and the opportunities that we have to serve God in the places that we find ourselves each and every day, if you're working a full-time 40 hours a week, 50 hours, or however many hours you're working, if we see that actually that's not really very important, what's more important is this, then we actually do have create that secular divide and say, actually, God is much more interested in this than he is in this place that you spend the majority of your time.
So actually, we've got to be careful in language. We've got to be careful how we express things. Even just throwaway comments we might make.
Absolutely. And culture is often largely expressed through language, through our actions and through our artifacts, the things that we find we celebrate are important. Yeah. That's part of our culture. And language is one of those things, and how we use particular words like mission or ministry or vocation, all those kind of things.
Calling,
absolutely. Yeah. And so, this is we locate calling, for example, only in a very narrow way. Then what we're suggesting is actually only certain people have a calling, and nobody else does. And I think that's a really quite difficult territory.
Someone in church is interested in full-time ministry.
Yeah,
and we talk about that at a prayer meeting. Maybe because we're having to fund it, and so we're making a contribution towards it. But we send them off. We have a sending service, and we rejoice that we've raised someone up and sent them out. Someone else goes through. They go through university. Perhaps they do a PGCE, and they stick around in church and say, "I'm going to be a physics teacher." Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Yeah. All the time we are actually creating a narrative, aren't we?
We are, and enabling people to see that their gifts and abilities are not reserved for what happens on a Sunday morning.
Right, okay.
But actually are God-given for their place in his
and actually for Bob, ultimately it's crushing, isn't it? It's crushing to think, if actually work doesn't mean anything apart from a means to an end to make money, it could be quite crushing to get to the end of life and think, well, what was the purpose of all of that?
When I worked in the bank, one of the things I've
by the way, I determined not to be rude about bankers in this episode.
That's a really good thing. I'm pleased to hear that.
Stop me if I'm rude about investment bankers, okay?
But I worked in an investment bank. I was in an investment bank, and I'm just to make very clear.
You mentioned
I was very, very low level.
You're very, very clear about that. I have got that.
I don't want people to think that I was higher than I actually was. But I remember thinking actually that this really wasn't very important. I couldn't see how on earth, helping others make money was of any eternal import at all. What I really wanted to do was go and serve God. Yeah. And so
that's got to be better, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
That's got to be better.
But what that ended up doing, though, is creating this sense in my own mind that actually it's okay for other people who don't have the call and don't have that to go and do things. And I remember when people at work who weren't Christians who would say, well, we're so pleased for you, that you're going off and doing something that you really want to do, or you're following your dream, or you're doing something that's really worthwhile, and thinking actually, it's really worthwhile. And under no circumstances should we say that gospel, kind of pastoring, teaching, preaching, leading churches is anyway not valuable. That's not where we're going to go at all.
We're not minimising.
We're not minimising at all. But what we want to do is maximise that the work of God's people in the world is valuable.
And Bob needs to hear about that.
And he needs to hear that.
And when he's in his small group, he needs to be asking other people for prayer help.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that I think as pastors we can do is kind of make those connections. So you mentioned earlier about this time tomorrow, which is saying that we really advocate, which is this idea of inner service, enabling, asking these 3 questions. Where are you going to be tomorrow morning? Where are you going to be tomorrow? What are you going to be doing there? And how can we pray for you?
Okay.
And recognizing that those places have importance, are important. Those are those places that God is at work, because His people are there. And if we see the places that people are working, or the environment they're in, as an opportunity for mission, not in the sense of just kind of overt mission.
Brenda,
work,
we'll come back to Brenda in a moment.
But actually as a place where mission takes place. So, for example, if you had a congregation member who decided they wanted to do overseas mission, and they felt God was leading to them, that absolutely brilliant that they want to do that, and so they work out, okay, what are they going to be doing? Well, actually, they're going to go overseas. They're going to immerse themselves in the culture. They're going to go and find a job in a school or a bank or on a farm. They're going to go out there and they're going to earn some money. And whilst they're there, they're going to find opportunities to share the gospel with Jesus. We would say, fantastic, go with our blessing. We're going to commission you and go and do that. Forgetting that if you just look behind you, you actually see there's a whole ton of people in your church who are doing precisely that in the very places that they're now working and earning a living, but actually that is their mission field.
So even in when you do your little this time tomorrow, if that's what you plan to do, even in the way that you prayed for that person at the end, you would communicate. Well, you could communicate positively some of those truths, but equally, you could say, "Oh, that's lovely," and you could say a prayer actually, which would completely undermine.
Absolutely, and praying publicly for people in whatever sphere, kind of whatever kind of employment or kind of work sphere they have, whether it's voluntary, whether that's at home, whether that's paid. Just acknowledging that in prayers actually is a really powerful way of saying, we'll hear when we listen to you. We want to know how can we pray for you and the opportunities that you have. If you're a Christian and you're a teacher or you're a doctor or you're work as a refuse collector, or we think actually it'd be great if we had opportunities to. Now, how do we get into those places? Well, actually, as Christians, you are those places.
We are.
And as we acknowledge ourselves as disciples of Jesus Christ,
That's
I
helpful.
don't stop being a disciple.
Okay. We'll come back to Brenda in just a moment. Just a little left field question. What about people? What about people in full-time education? Is that work? So I'm thinking, I'm not thinking about 4 or 5-year-olds necessarily, but I'm thinking about a 17-year-old who's following Jesus. She's doing a first year of her A-levels. Should we think about that as work as well?
Yeah, I think
so. Or is
so.
that different?
I think if we see it, studying, I think my issue, I think, is that sometimes we think of work as something that by its definition has to be onerous, has to be something I'm not enjoying, or something.
That's my experience. I'm 54. That's my experience.
But it's something I want to not do, so I can do more interesting things. And the thing is, studying. Actually, what am I doing? I'm working on bettering my mind and providing an opportunity for me to learn so that I can actually do something with that qualification, for example, or whatever that is. Then we're actually doing something which can bless others, bless ourselves, bless us, but actually bless and serve other people.
The blessing might be delayed, presumably, just in terms of...
Yes, it is, but actually, but also seeing that your sphere, if you're a student, that the place that you are is still a place where God has called you in that broad sense of that. If I'm a student,
this could transform parenting. And I mean, maybe we ought to talk about parenting. We're not going to talk about parenting now, but another time we ought to talk about parenting in this context.
Absolutely,
school is not just a burden that you have to go through before you can get to the real part of life.
Absolutely,
actually, there's something there which has intrinsic value in and of itself.
And I think actually, I always remember a conversation I had with a young woman in our church who had, I think she either had 3 children at that time or 4 children. I can't remember exactly the moment of the conversation. And she was saying to me, I'm really sorry that I'd love to be able to do more in the church. I'd love to be able to be at the Bible studies or come to the prayer meetings. I would do more. I used to do more before I was a parent. I just don't have the time. Just don't have the time to do it. And I had to stop and say, what you are doing is your ministry. What you're doing is important. This, bring it, not even, just being a parent and actually shaping a child's life, actually by being a good parent and being for them for that is actually God's work.
Isn't it? It's even a bit more than that, isn't it? In the sense that I think it would be a significant step in church life if we were to treat people in those circumstances more positively. But actually, we need to be able to go a bit further and say, how can we serve you in that work you've been called to?
Absolutely.
And that's moving it on an extra stage, but that's reflecting that this is a high calling.
Absolutely.
And it is work that's been given to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about Brenda, otherwise we're going to run out of time. So Brenda, remember, is my work missionary.
Yeah.
She loves work because she thinks of all the non-Christians she meets. It's basically the main place she meets non-Christians. And so she does the job. She's chosen her job because it gives her maximum exposure to people who aren't Christians. And she does that by... she's got the text above her desk, she's got a Bible open, T-shirt on dress down days, the kind of stuff. That's a slightly warped view, isn't it, of work as well? Just tell us what's good about that, what's wrong about that?
I think what's good about it is that they're going intentionally as a disciple.
Yes.
They're saying, actually, I'm a Christian here and I'm passionate about Jesus Christ and I want other people to know
and that's
him
to be honoured.
There is nothing wrong with that, and that's a perfectly valid way of looking at work. But it's not just the only one, but actually it's we've got to see it slightly more multi-layered. Actually, the question then is, am I sharing God's love through doing really good work? Am I spending so much time trying to do overt evangelism? Actually, I'm neglecting my work. And what impact is that having on my colleagues? I remember
they might end up being a poor witness.
Absolutely. And I remember this when I was at work, actually, when I was in working the bank, actually, that my focus was, what opportunity could I have to share the gospel? And you realise
you were a banker, were you, Jules? just to clarify.
But not for a very long time either. But the point is actually, and when I used to work for a box office as well, and actually, you think, actually, am I doing good work here? Am I doing something which actually blesses not just the companies, that enables other people to flourish, but am I doing something which honours my colleagues and the customers and people like that? Am I showing godly character by the way that I'm acting? Am I doing something which actually says there's something wrong here? What can I do about it? Am I shaping the culture by they're saying, actually, the way things are being done around here isn't necessarily the right way of doing, but actually I can, in my own small way, I can shift things. And if we see our ministry as disciples in that longer, bigger picture of actually shaping the world and preparing it for the new creation, God's consummation, God's fulfillment of all things, whether God takes those things into his eternity, then I think actually we see the value of even the smallest things, which may not even be of any consequence, anybody will notice. That actually is significant.
And also in terms of witness, we're in 1 Peter territory here, aren't we? Live such good lives.
Yeah.
That actually we have to believe, and I think experience bears out, that when you live a good life, when you work well and in an honourable way that blesses others, because you have this high view of work, there are opportunities to witness.
And I think we find this actually, there are plenty of stories of people who, when they've had that renewed attitude of doing really good work that honours their colleagues, their customers and all those things, and actually sees their work as important in and of itself because of what value it can give to others and glorifies God in it. It provides opportunities. And I think it's living provocative lives. Yeah, and we use that word provocative in a very, we have to be quite sure how we're using that.
Yeah, so go on, say what you mean.
But not provocative as in terms of kind of doing it in such a way that causes outrage.
Yes, not in its normal meaning.
No, absolutely. But provocative as it causes a reaction of, why are you doing that? It's giving a reason for the hope that you have. And this is the thing, actually, my work is, in and of itself, my work has value because God gives value to work, but also because my hope is not based on my work. If my work is all that there is, if my work is becomes an idol, But actually, if my hope, my work fits within my hope, actually my hope as a human being is that I will spend eternity with Christ.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that none of what I've ever done before that has ever had any value.
Okay. We haven't got long left. Could we talk about some practical things we could do to help people?
Yeah.
My sense is it's increasingly hard in some professions, at least, to be a Christian at work. Or people are feeling the burden of being a Christian at work. Do I have to take part in pride activities? Almost whatever job you do, that seems to be an issue. There are certain professions where there are particular challenges, for nursing, if you're working in certain wards, perhaps, and being asked to be involved in certain procedures. But leaving the specifics aside, what kinds of practical things can we do in church life to help people flourish in work?
I think recognizing that those things are real. I think actually when we're preparing for our sermons, when we're preaching, is actually have that in our mind of what are the kind of things that are going on in people's minds and hearts.
Right. So we've got to be in people's lives to work that.
Absolutely.
I think one of the challenges for preachers is they're just living in this sort of slightly odd world.
And I think obviously if you're a full-time pastor, then actually it will be different if you're working, tent making, or you're working as have a paid job outside of your pastoring. That you will have a slightly different understanding of these things. I mean, I remember when I was in kind of parish ministry, almost feeling, why doesn't everybody not get the fact that what I'm getting at with this sermon series or this passage? Realizing actually I spent however many hours on this and they haven't. They've been doing lots of other things, but my job is actually
important things.
How do I apply? How do I apply God's word into their situation? That doesn't mean knowing people, spending time with them, actually, and seeing,
getting feedback. Asking people, how did that help you in your workplace? And if someone says not at all, then okay, you need to hear that.
And making that connection. That actually, what I'm preaching, how will this help this person? How will this help Brenda on Monday morning at work? And seeing absolutely helping. How will that help them in their work to be a disciple?
Right.
Of Jesus Christ. How will that help shape their way that they see Christ at work through them in whatever they're being called to do? And I think so. Being conscious of those kind of questions is helpful, and that does mean kind of getting to know people and spending some time.
There's never any substitute for that in pastoral ministry. So we talked about that a lot on the podcast. Actually, it's really key. Absolutely,
and I think it's one of the things I found I was doing was. When you go and visit people, you're kind of, you want to ask people, what about their spiritual lives?
Yes. Yeah,
so how's your Bible reading? How's your prayer, etc.
Right,
And the danger is that you think, I'm interested in their spiritual life, but that life.
Yes.
Well,
or spiritual elements of life.
Absolutely.
So, who have you shared the gospel with at work?
Absolutely.
Rather than how's work?
Yeah, absolutely. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And how can you help people make that connection? And I think, praying about these things with people, listening to them, giving the opportunity, like this time tomorrow, giving an opportunity to other people in the church to hear that and say, actually, they're going through the same thing as I'm going through, or I never even realized that. I never even realized that was a thing, and giving people an opportunity to hear from each other actually builds community, builds the fellowship of the church as well, and helps each other pray for one another. I think that's really key.
LICC do great work in this area. I know I benefited from some of it myself. Just outline some of the resources that would be available to us there that we could use as church leaders.
Yeah. So we have a book called Imagine Church, which is a kind of really kind of foundational book that helps. And that was based on the research that was done about 11 years ago now of what does it mean to kind of shape the culture of our church so that we take our whole lives seriously and actually enable this kind of discipleship. And we also have a resource we use called kind of Frontline Sundays, which is a series of service outlines, which is a really good place to actually for a whole congregation to have some teaching on work and how and some Bible teaching on how it works, and have a service. So work doesn't become like we're just going to do a sermon series on work, but actually it becomes part of the walking with of our.
Because there is a danger just doing a sermon series on work. You could just actually reinforce the misunderstandings that people have.
I think as well we have some for church leaders. We have a monthly email which goes out, which enables them to give resources that they can hear what's going on, just particularly for church leaders. We've actually just launched a church leaders Facebook group as well, which is great. Okay. Which is and that's about enabling one another us to learn from each other, rather than just saying, actually, well, what am I doing here? But actually, that creating that sense of community as well. I think it's easy to, as church leaders, to think you're alone. Actually, there are lots of other people going through the same questions and wanting to find the same kind of answers. So we have plenty of resources that they go to our website. They can find loads of resources.
We'll put the website link on the bottom of the show notes so people will be able to link through. Julian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting
me. Really stimulating talking to you, making me think about our own church and our ministry and how we conduct it and how important that is. So thank you so much for helping me and helping others. And this has been Independence, the FIEC podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please do like us and share the links. We'd appreciate that, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.